Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at what is quite possibly one of the most important and influential games ever to be released. Not just on the PlayStation, but just within gaming in general. And that is Final Fantasy VII. And it was originally released in 1997 for the PlayStation 1, and it was the first Final Fantasy VII to actually be released on a different console apart from a Nintendo console. And this was a big thing back in those days because this really actually allowed the standard RPG games, or JRPGs as they're more commonly known as, to be brought to a larger audience and a larger market. And it was the first major release to be really made successful outside of the Japanese market in terms of gaming. This game is highly acclaimed. It won so many awards based off its unique storytelling, graphical style, and just the playability factor of the game, because there was so much on offer here. And for fans of these type of games, this was the go-to game pretty much. It set actually the standards pretty much for every other game that came after it. And the PlayStation is home to an absolute ton of awesome RPG games, and this here definitely been one of the best on the system, and pretty much one of the best games ever made. And it still does hold its own today, and it's so much so that it has even inspired a complete from the ground up remake that's been released on modern consoles over the last while. So that will tell you the influence that this game actually has. So it is quite an incredible achievement in terms of gaming within the games industry. If you are a fan of these type of games, it is definitely something worthwhile playing, for sure, because it has a huge fan base. And if you ask anyone that's a fan of the Final Fantasy series, most notably 7 is always the one that they'll recognise pretty much the most, because everybody that's a gamer, or even people that weren't into RPGs, got into these type of games because of this game. This game inspired so many people and so many new gamers. It had to really change the industry and just that era of gaming in general. And like I said, it inspired so many other kind of games from other companies to try and do similar things. It really stood out from the crowd in terms of what it offered. So essentially you play like as a lone kind of ex-soldier that's originally tasked with kind of like going with a group of rogue activists to try and dismantle certain types of reactors and stuff within the game. And as the story goes on, that's what's so unique about it, because it starts off with a simple type of concept, but then it completely expands and totally takes on a whole life of its own then after that. And it really draws you in. Even though there's narration in the game, like with texts and stuff like that, but there's no actual voiceovers. Because back in those early days, it was pretty much the first 3D Final Fantasy game, so having voiceovers in these type of games was still relatively a new thing. And due to the overall size of the game as well, especially with the limitations of the hardware, because the game size were so big, they probably had to leave certain things out. And this was one of the first games to ever come on more than 2 discs on the PlayStation as well. That's what was quite unique for it at the time. Like, this game was huge. For it to span 3 discs was an incredible feat at the time. And you definitely got your money's worth, that's for sure. But anyone that played it will definitely know what it's all about. And if you love these style of games and RPGs in general, this is definitely one of the go-to games. I myself personally have actually become a massive fan of this over the years as well. I will openly admit that when I first seen it, I didn't really understand or really know too much about RPG games. The only ones I kind of played were likes of Zelda games, but they were more action orientated. This was one of the first ones that I'd ever truly seen where you didn't have that freedom of movement, that literally just you had to kind of take turns in your attacks, and it was definitely a lot slower paced. And I remember when I first seen it, I didn't really understand the concept of it, and I just kind of found it a bit off-putting. I remember like the very first time I actually ever seen it, it was actually a friend of mine, Mark. He had actually bought it, and he brought it down to the house one weekend, and himself and my brothers were all playing it. The boys loved it. but I couldn't get into it. But then I suppose the one thing I did like about it is I loved the pre-rendered backgrounds. That was the thing that drew me in straight away, because I'm a big fan of pre-rendered backgrounds, and I'm a huge fan of, say, the Resident Evil games. So anything that uses that style of graphics, I'm straight away almost certain a big fan of. But I did find it a little bit kind of difficult to really get into the look and feel of this game at first, because it was very different from the usual type of games that you would usually play. Because of the fact is, yeah, you could move the characters around and you could interact and you could explore, which I love doing, but the fact is when it came to the fight scenes, you had to use different kind of turn-based formats, which I wasn't really familiar with at that time, and I didn't really understand it. It took a while for me to warm to it, if I'll be honest. But it was one of those games that the more I actually sat and I watched it, now I didn't play it for myself for actually quite a long time, but my brothers did, and my friend Mark used to take it down to the house. And eventually then my brothers then eventually bought it down, and they played it for ages. But it was one of those games I actually really enjoyed just to actually sit down and play, or watch them playing. And even just getting into the whole story. Actually, that was what was really cool about it. It definitely had that unique presence. It could draw you in. Even if you weren't a fan, you would sit there and you'd be very intrigued by it, because the really good graphics style, the storytelling, it really did just draw you in, even if you weren't a fan of this type of genre. And like I said, it was one of those games that it took a while, but eventually I did warm to it. And when eventually then, about a year or two later, I eventually did actually sit down and actually play it myself, after spending months actually watching my brothers play it. And I says, right, I'll see what all the fuss is about. And my brothers, especially my brother Damien, he's a huge fan of this here. It's one of his most all-time favourite games. And a lot of my other friends would be in the same. They would definitely think the same with this game. And I did sit down and play it, and I'll be honest, it was everything that they had said and expected. It not only was one thing to actually sit down and to watch it, but then to actually play it yourself. It took a bit of getting used to, I will admit, but my brother actually showed me what to do, and before long I was addicted to it. I couldn't believe how addictive the game actually is. These type of games I didn't think would be, because I'm so used to playing like the racing games and more action orientated games. I didn't think that I could get into games like this. But I was just as addicted to this as I actually was to pretty much any game I'd actually ever played. And I can see why people love these games so much, and especially the likes of this one. And it has, I've found a newfound respect for RPG games as a result of actually allowing myself to play this. And I went on then to play other games within the genre on the PlayStation as well. And I have to admit, so some of the RPG games are actually among some of the best I've ever played now, and quite rightly so, because had I not allowed myself to actually sit down and actually give them a chance and try to explore them and try to understand them, I mean, I know myself I would have missed out. So I'm actually glad that I did play it when I did. But I think a lot of it kind of goes back to, say, with that era when you were younger, because there were certain type of games that I actually genuinely really enjoyed. And to try and to play something that was completely different, you didn't really understand it, and sometimes it took a while for you to kind of change your mindset, to really open up your mind to allow yourself to actually explore it. But when I did, it opened up a whole new world of possibilities, but not only that, it opened up the floodgates to be able to enjoy so many other cool games on the system that had similar kind of characteristics and traits. Like even another game that I've actually played, I done a previous video of it there not too long ago, in Kudalka. Even though it is an RPG based game and it does have a different type of game style and mechanics, but I'll be honest, I was absolutely addicted to that game. That's actually one of my favourite RPGs on the PlayStation, if not ever. I know it didn't get as good ratings compared to some other games, but I thought it was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. And the same with this here. And I have played others since, and again, like I said, I've truly found a whole new love for the likes of these type of games, and I actually do want to go back to actually play them, because I actually enjoyed playing this so much that after a while, when Final Fantasy VIII then came out, I did actually go and play that as well. I will admit, I didn't think the story in it was really good, but I definitely liked the whole concept of this one here a lot more. But the graphical style of Final Fantasy VIII was actually, in my opinion, a better style, or it looked better, looked more realistic. But again, graphics aren't everything in the game. Sometimes it's not always about the visual style of the game, it's how the game actually draws you in, and this game had that down to a T. This is definitely one of the best games ever made. It really is, and it proves that point. It doesn't have to be exceptional looking for it to really draw you in. Some of the best games that I know myself have ever played are the ones that actually didn't look that great, and they're actually hidden gems. But this one here pretty much set the standard for all the games that came after it. Even though the Final Fantasy franchise had already been out for quite a number of years and had different previous iterations, and this was the 7th in the series, so but this here took on a whole different persona. Even to this date, up until the recent remake, this is still considered the best version in the series. So it is. It just because it just opened up the floodgates to so many people getting drawn in, like I said, and literally it literally single-handedly in some ways actually changed the way people play games from that point onwards in 1997, and never really looked back. The cool thing I found about playing this and then other style RPG games as well is the leveling up system. Once I got more familiar with these type of concepts in gaming, you could definitely see as games that have come out over the years, a lot of them use like similar type of even action type games, they use somewhat of RPG characteristics to level up your character's weapons and character abilities and traits. And I do actually enjoy that now in gaming because it gives you that replayability factor and allows you to keep playing it and get the most out of the game if at all possible. And I can see why people love these games so much, and quite rightly so, because they are fantastic, and this is definitely one of the best ones. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this game and that you have played it, and I'm sure that you agree that it definitely is one of the best games out there, and definitely on the PS1. But for those that haven't played it and have yet to experience it, I do highly recommend that you actually do look into this and just give it a go. It may take a bit of getting used to, like most games, if you're not really used to them, but just give it time and it will actually work its way on you. You will warm to it and you'll be just as addicted as myself and other gamers have been over the years. So it really is truly an incredible game, pretty much a masterpiece in all honesty. So it is. And then even with the most recent remake, it shows how influential the game actually is and how popular it actually is, and it still is even to this day. So what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy VII, or even just the Final Fantasy franchise in general? What are your fond memories of it? Is it one of the best games you've ever played? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to share them down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like. Also hit that subscribe button and also hit the bell icon to be updated whenever I release future videos, as I will be re-exploring these old classics, but also getting the chance to try and explore other types of games similar to this that I never got to experience back in the day, and sharing all my thoughts with everyone. So until next time, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.